The silence of space was broken by a signal that should not have existed. Commander Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the Earth ship Liberty, watching the strange patterns dance across his communication screen. The signal came from beyond the edge of known space, pulsing with desperate energy through the cosmic void. "Sir, you need to see this," said Captain Lisa Rodriguez, her voice tight with concern. She stood at the tactical station, her dark eyes fixed on the data streaming. Across multiple displays, this transmission is coming from 17 different sources, all using different languages we've never heard before. Jake pushed himself up from his chair and walked over to examine the readings. The Liberty was on routine patrol duty in the Outer Rim, far from Earth's busy shipping lanes. They were supposed to be alone out here, just another human ship keeping watch for pirates or equipment failures. The idea that aliens might be trying to contact them seemed impossible. "Can we understand any of it?" Jake asked. Lisa shook her head. "Not yet, but the computer's finding patterns. Look at this." She pointed to a series of waveforms that repeated across all 17 signals. "Whatever they're saying, they're all saying the same thing." Dr. Peter Walsh, the ship's science officer, looked up from his workstation. He was a thin man with graying hair who had spent most of his career studying theoretical alien life. Now, faced with actual contact, his hands shook as he worked. "Commander, I think I can help with this. Give me a few hours with the translation software." Jake nodded. "Do it. But keep this quiet for now. We don't know what we're dealing with." 3 hours later, Peter called the senior staff to the briefing room. His face was pale, and his usual enthusiasm was replaced by something that looked like fear. "I've managed to decode parts of the message," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not good news." The main screen lit up with alien symbols that slowly transformed into English text. The words that appeared made everyone in the room go silent. "Help us. We are dying. Our worlds burn. Our children scream. The swarm takes everything. Please, anyone who receives this message, help us. We do not know war. We do not know how to fight. They come from the darkness between stars and turn our people into food. Help us before we are gone forever." Jake felt his stomach turn. "How many of these messages have we received?" "Over 300, Peter replied. "Coming, Commander. I think we're looking at genocide on a scale we can't imagine." Lisa pulled up star charts on her tablet. "These signals are coming from the Kepler sector. It's about 400 light-years from here. If these aliens have faster-than-light communication, they might have travel technology too." "What about the swarm they mentioned?" Jake asked. Peter activated another screen showing data he had collected from the alien messages. "From what I can understand, they're facing something called the Vorthan swarm. It appears to be a parasitic species that feeds on other life forms. The aliens describe them as creatures that reproduce by placing eggs inside living hosts." The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Jake spoke. "How bad is it?" "According to the messages, 300 worlds have already fallen," Peter said. "Billions of people have been killed or enslaved. The aliens sending these messages come from different species, but they're all facing the same enemy." Jake walked to the window and stared out at the stars. Growing up on Earth, he had always wondered if humans were alone in the universe. He knew they weren't, and the first news from their galactic neighbors was a cry for help against monsters. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "there's something else. I ran projections based on the attack patterns described in these messages. If this Vorthan swarm continues expanding at their current rate, they'll reach human space within 50 years. The weight of this revelation settled on everyone present. This wasn't just about helping strangers anymore. Earth itself might be in danger." Jake made his decision. "Send everything we've collected to Earth Command, full priority transmission, and prepare a detailed report for Admiral Helen Carter." 2 days later, Jake received a response from Earth. Admiral Carter's message was brief but clear. "Stand by for further orders. Do not engage unknown contacts. Galactic Affairs Committee is reviewing your findings." But Jake knew that politicians and committees moved slowly. Every hour they waited meant more alien worlds might fall to this swarm. He ordered the Liberty to move closer to the Kepler sector, officially to gather better intelligence. As they traveled toward the source of the distress signals, more messages arrived. Peter worked around the clock to translate them, and each new message painted a darker picture. The aliens described cities that had stood for thousands of years being consumed in days. They spoke of children being taken from their parents to serve as breeding hosts for the swarm. One message stood out from the rest. It came from a being who identified herself as High Scholar Zalera of the Zephyrian Council. Her people had been among the first to face the swarm, and her world was now under direct attack. "We have tried to reason with them," her message said. "We offer them resources, technology, even uninhabited worlds to satisfy their hunger. They do not want territory or wealth. They want us, want our bodies, our minds, our children. We who have never raised weapons against another living being now watch our civilization die because we do not know how to kill." Jake read this message 3 times before calling his senior staff together again. "These people need our help," he said simply.
How?
"And from what we've learned, we might need to help them to save ourselves." Lisa looked troubled. "Sir, we're just one ship." "What? Can we do against something that's destroyed 300 worlds?" Jake thought about this question for a long time. Humans had always been fighters. Throughout history, they had faced impossible odds and found ways to survive. They knew about war, about sacrifice, about the terrible choices that had to be made to protect the innocent. "We know something these aliens don't," he said finally. "We know how to fight."
Dr. Peter Walsh,
who had been quiet during most of the discussion, suddenly looked up from his tablet. "Commander, I've been analyzing the biological data from the alien messages. These Vorthons seem to be perfectly adapted for attacking peaceful civilizations. But their tactics, their biology, everything about them suggests they've never faced serious resistance." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "They reproduce quickly, but individual units are fragile. They rely on overwhelming numbers and psychological terror. Their entire strategy depends on their enemies being too afraid or too gentle to fight back effectively." Peter's eyes lit up with understanding. "They're bullies, Commander. We know how to deal with bullies." That night, Jake sent a message back to Earth. He didn't wait for committee approval or political discussion. He simply told Admiral Carter what he planned to do. "The aliens need help, and Earth needs these aliens to survive. I request permission to organize a rescue mission to the Kepler sector. We have weapons they don't have, tactics they've never seen, and most importantly, we have the will to fight. These people are crying for help, and we're the only ones who can answer." The response came faster than Jake expected. Admiral Carter's message was short, but carried the weight of Earth's full authority behind it. "Operation Starshield is authorized. You have command of the first human intervention fleet. Show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens the innocent." As Jake prepared his ship for the journey ahead, he couldn't help but think about how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, humanity thought it was alone in the universe. Now they were about to become the galaxy's protectors. The stars ahead held danger, suffering, and probably death. But they also held hope, and Jake Morrison was determined to bring that hope to the aliens who had cried out in their darkest hour. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system, and what they saw made even the most experienced soldiers go quiet. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty, staring at the tactical display that showed a world under siege. Massive ships hung in orbit around Zephyr Prime like diseased tumors against the stars. The Vorthon bioships were nothing like human vessels. They pulsed with sickly green light, their surfaces covered in what looked like living tissue. Some were shaped like enormous insects, others resembled internal organs blown up to the size of cities. All of them were feeding. "My God," whispered Captain Lisa Rodriguez, her voice barely audible over the bridge communications. "Look at the surface scans." The planet below showed signs of systematic destruction. Where Zephyrian cities had once stood, there were now massive crater-like wounds in the earth. Strange organic structures grew from these wounds like cancerous growths spreading across the landscape in web-like patterns. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Parker, commander of the Marine units, joined them on the bridge. He was a big man with scars from a dozen different battles, but even he looked shaken by what they were seeing. "Sir, we're getting readings of massive life signs from those organic structures, but they're not Zephyrian." Jake nodded grimly.
What?
"Warthans are using the planet as a breeding ground." Dr. Peter Walsh worked frantically at his science station, analyzing the data flowing in from their sensors. "Commander, I'm detecting Zephyrian life signs too. They're inside those structures. They're still alive." The bridge fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. The Vorthans weren't just killing the Zephyrians, they were keeping them alive to serve as living factories for more Vorthon creatures. "Sir," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's in Zephyrian." "Let's put it through," Jake ordered. The alien voice that came through the speakers was weak and filled with pain. Dr. Walsh quickly translated the words as they came through. "Please, if anyone can hear this, help us. They have taken our children to the breeding centers. Our people are being processed through living assembly lines. We cannot fight them. Do not know how. Please, someone help us before we are all gone." Jake felt anger rise in his chest like a cold fire. These creatures were treating sentient beings like cattle, turning children into breeding stock for their twisted reproduction cycle. He had seen war before, but nothing like this level of calculated cruelty. "Colonel Parker," he said, his voice steady, despite the rage he felt. "Prepare your Marines for immediate deployment. We're going down there." Sam Parker straightened. "Sir, we don't know their numbers or capabilities. This could be a trap." "Then we spring it," Jake replied. "Those people have been waiting for help long enough." The first strike team launched in heavily armed shuttles toward the planet's surface. Marine Sergeant Amy Phillips led the advance unit. A tough woman from Texas who had earned her stripes fighting pirates in the outer colonies. As their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, she checked her weapons one more time and looked at her squad. "Listen up, Marines," she said over the comm system. "These Vorthan things think they can treat people like food. Well, they've never tried to eat humans before, and they're about to learn why that's a bad idea." The shuttles landed near one of the organic structures that the Vorthans had built. Up close, it was even more horrifying than the scans had suggested. The structure was made of living tissue that pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange openings in its surface leaked fluids that smelled like death and decay. Amy led her squad toward the nearest entrance, their weapons ready. The moment they stepped inside, they knew they had entered hell. The interior of the structure was a maze of tunnels made from what looked like digestive tissue. Along the walls, Zephyrian prisoners were held in organic pods that kept them alive while small Vorthan creatures fed on their bodies. The aliens' crystalline forms were pale and weak, but their large eyes still held intelligence and hope. "Jesus Christ," muttered one of the Marines. "They're farming them." Amy raised her rifle as the first Vorthon defenders appeared. Gosh, the creatures were unlike anything in human experience. They moved on multiple legs like giant spiders, but their bodies were soft and fleshy. So they had no eyes that she could see, but they seemed to sense the humans immediately. "You want to harvest people?" Amy shouted as she opened fire. "Come harvest us!" The battle that followed would become legendary in both human and alien military history. The Vorthons had evolved to fight species that relied on energy shields and defensive tactics. They had never faced an enemy that attacked with kinetic weapons, explosives, and pure aggressive fury. Human bullets tore through Vorthan flesh like paper. Their fragile bodies, designed for overwhelming peaceful civilizations, couldn't withstand the sustained firepower that humans brought to bear. But more importantly, the Vorthans couldn't understand human tactics. Where Zephyrians fought in organized formations with predictable patterns, humans used guerrilla warfare. They split into small groups, attacked from multiple directions, and used the Vorthon's own structures against them. Marines would set explosive charges in one area to draw defenders, then attack from completely different directions. Dr. Karen Hughes, the expedition's xenobiologist, worked with the rescue teams to free Zephyrian prisoners from their organic pods. What she discovered made her both sick and hopeful at the same time. The Vorthan biology is perfectly adapted for attacking defenseless populations, she reported to Jake over the CUM system. Their rapid reproduction depends on having unopposed access to host organisms. But sustained resistance disrupts their entire life cycle. Meanwhile, in space, the human fleet engaged the Vorthan bioships. Captain Lisa Rodriguez coordinated the attack from the Liberty's tactical station. The alien ships were massive, but they moved slowly and seemed confused by human attack patterns. They're trying to establish some kind of formation, she reported. But every time they start to organize, we hit them from a different angle. The Vorthan ships fired biological weapons that would have been devastating to other alien species. Acidic compounds that dissolved metal, spores designed to shut down alien nervous systems, and viral agents that attacked foreign DNA. But human ships were built differently, with multiple backup systems and sealed environments that protected the crew. More importantly, human crews didn't panic when things went wrong. When the biological weapons damaged their ships, they adapted and kept fighting. When their systems failed, they found new ways to attack. The Vorthons had never faced an enemy that got more dangerous when cornered. On the planet's surface, Amy Phillips and her Marines had cleared 3 breeding facilities and rescued hundreds of Zephyrian prisoners. The aliens were weak from their captivity, but they watched the humans with something approaching religious awe. One young Zephyrian, barely able to speak, managed to whisper something to Dr. Hughes. When she translated it, the words sent chills through everyone who heard them. She says, "We are the warriors who weep for strangers," Hughes reported. She wants to know why we came so far to help people we had never met. Amy knelt down beside the young alien and spoke gently, even though she knew the words would have to be translated, because that's what you do when someone needs help. You help them. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 17 Vorthan bioships had been destroyed or driven off, and 4 major breeding facilities had been liberated. Thousands of Zephyrian prisoners were freed, though many would need months of medical care to recover from their ordeal. As the last Vorthan ships fled the system, Jake stood on his bridge watching the alien refugees being transferred to human medical ships. The victory felt good, but he knew this was just the beginning. Sir, Lisa said quietly, "We're receiving transmissions from all over the galaxy. Word of what we did here is spreading fast." Jake nodded. He had expected this. In a galaxy where peaceful species had always been helpless against predators, the news that someone had finally fought back and one would spread like wildfire. "What are they saying?" he asked. Lisa smiled for the first time since they had arrived at Zephyr Prime. "They're asking for help, sir. Dozens of different species, all facing the same kinds of enemies. They want to know if the warriors from Earth will come help them too." Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, more innocent, people were suffering at the hands of creatures like the Vorthons. The thought should have been overwhelming, but instead he felt something he hadn't expected. He felt ready. The news traveled faster than any human ship could fly. Within days of the victory at Zephyr Prime, every major civilization in the galaxy had heard about the strange warriors from a distant world called Earth. Communication networks that had been silent for months suddenly buzzed with activity as species that had given up hope began to whisper about the possibility of salvation. "Captain," Ryan Bell received the first indication of how far the news had spread during a routine deep space patrol mission. His ship, the Defender, was exploring the outer edges of the Andromeda Arm when they intercepted a transmission between 2 alien vessels. "Did you hear about the humans?" one voice asked, in a language the ship's computer was still learning too. "Translate the Deathworlders, who saved Zephyr Prime," came the reply. "Every ship in the sector is talking about them. They say these humans fight like demons but cry when innocents suffer." Ryan called his crew together to discuss what they were hearing. The communications officer, Lieutenant Jenny Adams, had been monitoring alien broadcasts for weeks and had compiled a disturbing picture of the galaxy's current state. "Sir, the Vorthon swarm was just one threat," she reported. "I'm picking up distress calls from 7 different regions of space. There are at least 6 other predator species currently attacking peaceful civilizations." The science officer, Dr. Steve Adams pulled up a galactic map showing the locations of various conflicts. Red zones marked areas where entire star systems had gone dark, their populations either destroyed or enslaved by various apex predator species. The crystalline devourers in the Andromeda arm consumed technology and metal, leaving worlds stripped bare, he explained. The Shadow Collective near the galactic core specializes in psychological warfare, driving entire populations insane before harvesting their minds. Each predator species has evolved to exploit the weaknesses of peaceful civilizations. Ryan studied the map with growing understanding. And none of these peaceful species know how to fight back. Exactly, Steve replied. Until now, the galaxy operated on the assumption that aggressive species would always dominate peaceful ones. The idea that someone would fight to protect strangers was completely foreign to most alien cultures on Earth. The colonial governors from Mars, Europa, the outer settlements had called an emergency session to question why Earth's resources should be spent protecting aliens. Governor Bill Carson from the Mars colonies spoke for many when he argued, "We have our own problems. Pirates, equipment failures, resource shortages. Why should we risk human lives for creatures we've never met?" The debate might have continued for months. But everything changed when Ambassador Julie Green returned from her mission to the Galactic Council. She brought with her something that made even the most isolationist governors reconsider their positions. "They're offering us a full membership in the Galactic Council," she announced to the stunned assembly, along with complete access to their databases, star charts, and technology exchanges. She activated a holographic display that showed the wealth of information the aliens were willing to share. Faster-than-light communication systems, advanced medical techniques, energy sources that could power entire planets, and manufacturing processes that could end scarcity forever. "The catch," Julie continued, "is that they want our protection in return. They've seen what we can do, and they know that without us, half the galaxy's civilizations will be extinct within a decade." Governor Carson leaned forward. "What exactly are they asking for?" "They want us to become the galaxy's police force," Julie replied simply. "They want human fleets patrolling their space, human soldiers training their defenders, and human commanders leading joint operations against predator species." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what was being offered. Humanity could advance centuries in just a few years, gaining access to knowledge and resources beyond their wildest dreams. The price was taking responsibility. For protecting billions of alien lives, President Torres made the decision that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. "We accept," she said, "but we do it on our terms." Meanwhile, in the Kepler sector, Colonel Maria Santos was discovering just how different humans were from their new alien allies. She had volunteered to train Zephyrian volunteers who wanted to defend their own worlds, expecting the process to be straightforward. It wasn't. The Zephyrians were intelligent, dedicated, and grateful for human help. But they struggled with concepts that came naturally to human soldiers. When Maria demonstrated basic combat tactics, the aliens understood the theory, but couldn't execute the practice. "The problem isn't physical," she explained to Jake Morrison during a video conference. "They're strong enough and fast enough, but they can't think like predators. When I tell them to attack an enemy position, they instinctively look for ways to minimize harm to everyone involved, including the enemy." Jake nodded. He had observed similar issues with other alien species they had begun working with.
What?
About their progress overall, they're learning, Maria replied. But it's like teaching someone to breathe underwater. We're asking them to do something that goes against millions of years of evolution. They can learn to follow human tactics, but they can't develop the mindset that makes those tactics effective. This difference became the subject of intense study among human xenobiologists and military strategists. Dr. Karen Hughes published a report that would become required reading for all human personnel working with alien allies. Most galactic species evolved as prey animals, she wrote. Their instincts tell them to flee from danger, seek consensus before acting, and avoid causing harm whenever possible. Humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world where everything was trying to kill us. Our instincts tell us to face danger head-on, make quick decisions under pressure, and eliminate threats completely. The implications of this research reached far beyond military applications. Human negotiators found that alien diplomats expected lengthy discussions and careful consideration of all viewpoints before making any decisions. When humans needed to act quickly to save lives, aliens interpreted this as reckless aggression. Cultural misunderstandings became common. When Marine Sergeant Amy Phillips told a group of alien refugees, "We'll die before we let them hurt you," the aliens were horrified. They couldn't understand why anyone would choose death over survival, even to protect others. But they were learning. Dr. Julie Adams, now serving as humanity's first xenocultural specialist, documented how different species reacted to prolonged contact with humans. The Zephyrians began incorporating human concepts of sacrifice and duty into their religious practices. The Corvan Empire, a militaristic species that had previously been neutral in galactic conflicts, started requesting joint training exercises with human forces. "The humans are changing us," reported Corvan General Thax during a diplomatic meeting. "They show us that strength without compassion is meaningless, but compassion without strength is powerless. It is a difficult balance for warriors to understand, perhaps." The most significant change came from an unexpected source. The Galactic Council, which had operated for thousands of years as a loose confederation focused mainly on trade agreements, began discussing the formation of an actual galactic government with enforcement capabilities. "For the first time in galactic history, we have a species willing to use force to protect the innocent," explained Council Speaker Velen during a public broadcast. "This changes everything about how civilizations can interact with each other." The broadcast was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Rigel sector. A new predator species had emerged from the galactic void, attacking worlds with a level of savagery that shocked even veteran observers. The message was brief but desperate. "This is the Antaron Republic requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our defenses have failed. Millions are dead. Please, if the humans can hear this, we need help now." Within hours, 3 human battle groups were en route to the Rigel sector. For the first time, alien species volunteered to join the mission not as victims seeking rescue, but as allies ready to fight alongside humanity, as the combined fleet prepared for another battle against darkness. Jake Morrison reflected on how quickly the galaxy had changed. 6 months ago, most species had never heard of humans. Now they were calling Earth's warriors whenever evil raised its head among the stars. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the opportunity. Humanity had the chance to reshape galactic civilization, to create a universe where the strong protected the weak instead of preying upon them. It would not be easy, and it would not be without cost. But as Jake watched alien and human crews working side by side, he knew they were building something that had never existed before in the galaxy. They were building hope. 6 months had passed since the first human ships answered alien cries for help, and the galaxy was learning to speak a new language. The word Deathworlder had entered the vocabulary of every major civilization, spoken sometimes with reverence, sometimes with fear, but always with respect. General Frank Cooper stood before a classroom filled with beings from 12 different species, all of them trying to understand how humans thought about war. The training facility on Kepler Station had become the galaxy's first interspecies military academy, and Frank was discovering that teaching aliens to fight was more complicated than anyone had expected. The key difference, he explained to his mixed audience of Zephyrians, Corvins, Altarians, and others, is that humans don't see warfare as a last resort. We see it as another tool to solve problems. A Zephyrian officer raised her crystalline hand. But General Cooper, how do you justify causing harm when peaceful solutions might exist? Frank had heard this question dozens of times from different species because sometimes there is no peaceful solution. When someone is hurting innocent people and refuses to stop, talking becomes a waste of time that costs more lives. The concept was difficult for most aliens to grasp. Their civilizations had developed complex diplomatic traditions, based on the assumption that all conflicts could eventually be resolved through negotiation. The idea that some enemies simply needed to be destroyed was foreign to their thinking. In another part of the facility, Dr. Linda Foster was making discoveries that explained why humans were so different from their galactic neighbors. Her medical research team had been studying the biological differences between humans and other species, and the results were startling. "Commander Morrison, you need to see this," she said during their weekly briefing. "We've been running stress tests on human volunteers compared to alien allies, and the differences are remarkable." She pulled up a holographic display showing comparative data. When most alien species encounter danger, their bodies shut down non-essential functions to conserve energy for escape. Their heart rates slow, their muscles become less responsive, and their thinking becomes focused on finding safe hiding places. Jake leaned forward, interested. "And humans?" "Humans do the opposite," Linda replied with something like amazement in her voice. "When we encounter danger, our bodies flood with chemicals that make us faster, stronger, and more aggressive. Our heart rates spike, our reaction times improve, and our brains start looking for ways to eliminate the threat rather than escape from it." This research explained what had happened during the Battle of Titan's Gate when human soldiers had turned a Vorthan biological weapon into an advantage. The toxic spores that should have weakened the human Marines had instead triggered their adrenaline response, making them even more effective fighters. "It's like we were designed by evolution to thrive in combat situations," Linda continued. "Most species evolve to survive by avoiding danger. Humans evolve to survive by facing danger and defeating it." The practical implications of this research were being tested in battle zones across the galaxy. Commander Tony Mitchell had developed what became known as the Rapid Response Protocol, where small teams of human soldiers could deploy to threatened worlds. Within 72 hours of receiving a distress call, these rapid response teams operated with unprecedented independence, making battlefield decisions that would have required committee approval in alien military structures. When the agricultural world of Centauri 7 came under attack by slavers, Mitchell's team arrived before the local government had even finished debating whether to request help. "We don't have time for paperwork when people are dying," Mitchell explained to the grateful Centauri officials after his team had eliminated the slaver operation. "Human military doctrine is simple. Identify the threat, neutralize the threat, protect the innocent. Everything else is just details." But the psychological impact of human intervention was proving to be as important as the military victories. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy describe predator species abandoning planned attacks after learning that humans might respond to calls for help. The Shadow Collective, which had terrorized the inner worlds for decades with their psychological warfare, issued their first communication with galactic authorities in 50 years. The message was simple. "We wish to discuss terms for avoiding conflict with the Deathworlder species." Agent Nancy Baker, who had been monitoring these developments from Earth's intelligence headquarters, brought her concerns to President Torres during a classified briefing. "Ma'am, we need to talk about what we're becoming," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "The galaxy is starting to see us as something between guardian angels and monsters. Some species worship us, others are terrified of us, but none of them see us as equals anymore." President Torres studied the reports Nancy had compiled. Opinion polls from allied worlds showed approval ratings for human intervention consistently above 90%, but they also revealed something troubling. Many aliens were beginning to see humans as inherently superior beings, rather than simply different ones. "What are you recommending?" Torres asked. "We need to be careful about the precedent we're setting," Nancy replied. "Right now, our methods work because our enemies don't understand us. But what happens when they adapt? And more importantly, what happens to our own humanity when the galaxy expects us to be perfect warriors all the time?" These concerns were not merely theoretical. Human soldiers returning from extended deployments in alien space reported increasing difficulty relating to civilian life. The constant pressure of being seen as invincible protectors was taking a psychological toll that military psychologists were still learning to address. Dr. Steve Adams, now serving as the chief xenocultural advisor to the military, published a classified report on what he called Deathworlder syndrome. Human personnel who spent too much time in alien space began to internalize the expectations of their alien allies, seeing themselves as fundamentally different from other humans. "We're creating a warrior caste," he warned in his report. Humans who see themselves as uniquely capable of violence in service of good causes. This is dangerous for both our society and our relationships with alien cultures. Despite these concerns, the practical benefits of human intervention continued to grow. Trade routes that had been closed for years due to piracy were reopening under human protection. Scientific expeditions that would have been impossible due to predator species were now being conducted with human escorts. The Corvan Empire, inspired by human military philosophy, restructured their entire defense doctrine around the concept of preemptive protection rather than reactive defense. "The humans have taught us that sometimes you must strike first to protect the innocent," explained Corvan General Thax. "It is a hard lesson for warriors to learn, but a necessary one." But perhaps the most significant change was happening among the predator species themselves. For the first time in galactic history, aggressive civilizations were being forced to consider the consequences of their actions. Species that had operated with impunity for centuries now had to worry about human retaliation. The Vorthan swarm, decimated by multiple encounters with human forces, sent their first diplomatic communication in their species' recorded history. The message, transmitted through intermediaries, was a simple request for a non-aggression pact. "We acknowledge the territorial claims of the Deathworlder species and their allies," the message read. "We wish to avoid further conflict and will restrict our activities to uninhabited systems." Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral and commanding the largest human fleet ever assembled, received this message while preparing for what everyone hoped would be the final major campaign against predator forces in the Outer Rim. "Sir," asked Captain Lisa Rodriguez, who had remained his tactical officer through all their campaigns, "are we going to accept their offer?" Jake thought about all the worlds the Vorthans had destroyed, all the innocent lives they had consumed, all the suffering they had caused. Then he thought about the human soldiers who had died stopping them, and the alien allies who looked to humanity for protection. "Send them our terms," he said finally. "Complete withdrawal from all inhabited systems, reparations for damaged worlds, and submission to galactic monitoring. If they agree, we'll give them a chance to change." As the message was transmitted, Jake reflected on what humanity had become in just 1 year. They had arrived in galactic politics as strangers answering a cry for help. Now, they were the arbiters of justice among the stars, the species that other civilizations turned to when evil threatened the innocent. It was a responsibility that no one had asked for, and no one was fully prepared to handle. But as Jake looked out at the mixed fleet of human and alien ships preparing for their next mission, he knew they would find a way to bear it. After all, that's what humans did. They found a way. 2 years had passed since Commander Jake Morrison first heard alien voices crying for help across the void of space. Now Admiral Morrison stood in the command center of the massive space station that had become the unofficial capital of the galaxy's defense network. Earth was no longer just humanity's homeworld. It had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a planet where dozens of different species lived together under the protection of the people they called Deathworlders. The transformation had come at a cost that no one had fully anticipated. Earth's population had tripled as refugees from destroyed worlds sought the safety of humanity's home system. The planet's cities had expanded far beyond their original boundaries, with alien districts growing like colorful flowers among the familiar human architecture. The orbital platforms that once served only human ships now processed vessels from hundreds of different species. Dr. Alice Turner would become Earth's chief xenological coordinator, published regular reports on the social changes taking place. "We are witnessing the birth of the first truly integrated galactic civilization," she wrote in her latest analysis. But integration comes with challenges that no species has ever faced before. The challenges were becoming critical. Earth's resources were stretched thin, feeding, housing, and protecting billions of alien refugees. The planet's ecosystem struggled to accommodate the diverse environmental needs of so many different species. More troubling, many humans were beginning to question whether their world was still their own. The political situation had grown complex. Senator Robert Hill, representing the Earth's First movement, spoke for a growing number of humans who felt their species had sacrificed too much for alien causes. "We opened our doors to the galaxy," he argued during a heated session of the Global Assembly, "and now we're strangers in our own home." President Michelle Torres, now serving her second term, faced the most difficult decision of her career. The latest intelligence reports showed that the galaxy's predator species had formed an unprecedented alliance. 7 different aggressive civilizations had united with a single goal: eliminate the Deathworlder threat before humanity could make their expansion impossible. Admiral Carl Roberts, the highest-ranking human military officer, presented the situation to Earth's leadership with characteristic bluntness. "They call it the Apex Alliance," he explained, pointing to a holographic display showing enemy fleet movements. "Every major predator species in the galaxy has contributed ships and resources. Their combined fleet is larger than anything we've ever faced." The scale of the threat was staggering. Intelligence estimates suggested the Alliance commanded over 10,000 warships of various designs supported by biological weapons, psychic warfare specialists, and technological advantages stolen from conquered civilizations. More concerning, they had studied human tactics for 2 years and developed countermeasures. "They've learned from their defeats," Roberts continued. "They know our rapid response doctrine, they understand our tactical preferences, and they've prepared specifically to fight humans. This won't be like previous battles where we caught them off guard." The Alliance's strategy was simple but effective. They planned to assault the Nexus Gate, a gravitational anomaly that served as the galaxy's primary hyperspace junction. Control of the Nexus would allow them to cut human forces off from their alien allies and systematically eliminate resistance world by world. Jake Morrison found himself commanding the largest human fleet ever assembled, 300 ships, carrying the best of humanity's military force. But for the first time since the war began, he was not fighting alone. Alien allies from dozens of species had volunteered to join the battle, bringing their own ships and warriors to stand alongside the humans who had protected them. The mixed fleet that gathered at the staging area near the Nexus Gate represented something that had never existed in galactic history. Sifarian crystal ships flew in formation with human destroyers. Corvan battlecruisers shared tactical data with Altarian science vessels. Species that had been strangers 2 years ago now fought as brothers. Major Ellen Wright commanded the ground forces assigned to defend Nexus Station itself. She was a career soldier who had volunteered for every dangerous mission since the war began. But this battle felt different. Her husband, Captain Paul Wright, would be commanding orbital defenses while she led troops on the station. For the first time in their military careers, they would be fighting the same battle from different fronts. "If we lose here," Ellen told her mixed force of human marines and alien volunteers, "the Alliance will control galactic transportation for decades. Every free world will be cut off from support. Every species that trusted us will be left to face extinction alone." The battle began with a coordinated assault that demonstrated just how much the Alliance had learned about fighting humans. Dead. Of the direct attacks that had failed in previous engagements, they used feints, diversions, and psychological warfare designed to counter human advantages. Alliance bioships released clouds of spores that blocked human sensors. Psychic specialists attempted to overwhelm human commanders with fear and confusion. Traditional warships used hit-and-run tactics to avoid the concentrated firepower that had proven so effective against previous enemies. But the Alliance had made one critical miscalculation. They had studied human military tactics, but they had failed to understand the fundamental difference between humans and other species. They assumed that humans fought for conquest, territory, or resources. Just like every other aggressive species in galactic history, they were wrong, Captain. Paul Wright coordinated the space battle from his position aboard the defense platform, watching as Alliance forces tried to overwhelm his defenses through sheer numbers. When his weapon systems were damaged by enemy fire, he rerouted power from life support. When his shields failed, he used the platform itself as a weapon, ramming it into the largest Alliance bioship. "You want to control the galaxy?" he transmitted. To the Alliance fleet, as his platform burned around him, "You'll have to go through every human who ever swore to protect the innocent." On the station, Ellen Wright led her forces through corridors that had become killing fields. Alliance boarding parties had broken through in 6 different locations, using superior numbers to try to overwhelm the defenders. But human tactics had evolved during 2 years of galactic warfare, and Elon's troops were no longer just human. Zephyrian soldiers used their natural ability to communicate through crystal resonance to coordinate perfectly with human marines. Corvan warriors brought their species' natural aggression under human tactical discipline. Altarian technicians kept weapons and shields functioning despite constant enemy attacks. "This is what they never understood," Ellen said as she led a counterattack against Alliance forces in the station's central hub. "We don't fight for humanity. We fight for everyone who can't fight for themselves." The battle raged for 18 hours. Alliance forces threw everything they had at the Nexus Gate, using weapons and tactics that would have destroyed any previous defensive force. But they faced something that had never existed before in galactic warfare, an integrated force of species that had learned to fight, not just for their own survival, right, for the survival of others. When the last Alliance ship finally retreated, the cost was visible everywhere. Nexus Station was heavily damaged, with entire sections open to space. The human fleet had lost 40 ships, including some of the newest and most advanced vessels in Earth's Navy. Thousands of beings from dozens of species had died defending the gateway, but they had one. Dr. Alice Turner arrived with the relief ships to document the aftermath of the battle. What she found would reshape her understanding of what humanity had accomplished in the galaxy. "The Alliance came here expecting to fight humans," she wrote in her report. "What they found was something new, a galactic civilization that had learned to defend itself. The various species didn't fight as separate groups led by humans, fought as a unified force that happened to include humans. In the months that followed, the Alliance's defeat had consequences that reached every corner of the galaxy. Predator species that had remained neutral began requesting peace negotiations. Aggressive civilizations that had preyed on weaker neighbors. 4 centuries suddenly found themselves isolated and outnumbered. The galaxy was learning anew. Rule. Evil actions had consequences. And those consequences came in the form of beings who would cross the void of space to protect strangers. Admiral Jake Morrison, standing on the rebuilt observation deck of Nexus Station, received another transmission from the far edge of explored space. It was the familiar pattern, a desperate voice calling for help against forces they could not defeat alone. "Sir," asked his aide, "should we respond?" Jake looked out at the mixed fleet of human and alien ships that now patrolled the galaxies. Trade routes, protecting the innocent and hunting those who preyed upon them. Earth was no longer just humanity's home. It had become the heart of something larger, a civilization based on the radical idea that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them. "Send word to the fleet," he said. "We have work to do." The ships prepared for another mission to answer another cry for help. Jake reflected on what humanity had become,